All right, welcome back, everyone. So here we go. We're going to talk about the golden age of the Ottoman Empire now. We've been building up from this, settling of this little civilization that started in a little part of Asia Minor and expanded through areas like Thrace and Nicaea. And now we're going to enter this period of the golden age where we're going to have several Ottoman sultans really elevate the Ottoman Empire to its apex. And so this particular lecture is going to focus really on one Ottoman Sultan, a man named Mehmed II. And so we're going to kind of get to that in a second. But first of all, let's kind of go through the key sultans you're going to want to need to know. And so these are the sultans. You have your years. Again, for all my students, you don't need to memorize all the dates for all these guys, but you definitely want to know their names. And those are the approximate year. That's those rules are when they ruled, not when they lived, obviously. And the first one, Mehmed II and Suleiman, those are going to be the two most important. So in this lecture, I'm going to cover Mehmed II, 1451 to 1481, and then the next lecture, I'm going to get through these other individuals, which you'll want to know as well, especially for your midterm coming up. All right, so here we go. Let's get right to Mehmet. And so Mehmet II, he's sometimes known as Mehmet the Conqueror for good reason. He's going to be involved in taking over quite a few pieces of real estate that we're going to kind of talk about on this map. Pretty much almost everything you see kind of in that orange area on the map here, a lot of that's going to be because of Mehmet. He has some domestic issues at home. First of all, he's got his stepmom, Mara, apparently, who tried to overthrow him. So he had pretty much the entire family exiled. I believe they sent him off to Serbia, something like that, but just far away. And he spoke a lot of languages. He said he spoke 6 languages. He always surrounded himself with very good advisors, it was said. And his advisors really encouraged him to do something big, to do something dramatic during his time in power. And so the question is what? Well, the biggest, most dramatic thing you could do if you're an Ottoman Sultan is to try to go after Constantinople. And Constantinople, of course, here, right there, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, that area was still not controlled by the time we get to Mehmed II. A lot of the area around it was, you can see kind of in the dark red on this map, but not Constantinople. And so this was going to be the big plan. To do this, he's going to, first of all, actually create a series of forts around the Constantinople. And there's kind of a crazy little story about this, actually, that the Byzantine emperor at the time, Constantine the 11th, you could see here, and there's a lot of Byzantine emperors named Constantine. You can imagine, if you know a little bit of the history there, Constantine, the guy who converted Christianity before he died and all that, old Roman emperor. But anyway, so Constantine the 11th, he is the Byzantine emperor, and he's like, he's a little worried that Mehmed II is building all these forts, and so he actually, in kind of a goodwill gesture, sends an emissary to Mehmed II with lavish wealth to basically bribe him off and say, hey, could you stop trying to put all these forts to suffocate us and control us? And kind of as a goodwill gesture. And the story goes that Constantine the 11th, after he sent the emissary, gets a reply back from Mehmet, and the reply back was the severed head of his emissary. So not exactly very well received, because it was his determination to take over this piece of real estate and make it the center of the Ottoman Empire. So we get to 1452, and in 1452, you're going to start this massive onslaught. He's going to have about 200 ships, 50,000 men, and right over here, I don't know, hopefully you can see it here, you have another very important waterway, the Strait of Gallipoli, and it's through that area that he's going to spend months really surrounding the city, and then eventually also bombarding the city. I have a cool picture to show you here in a second of what they're going to do, but he's going to bombard the city with, actually just let me show it to you here, it'll make more sense, with the cannons. And so here you can see in this image the cannons laying siege on Constantinople. So after months and months and months and months, he's able to break through the city walls, these massive walls that defend the city. And by 1453, he's able to enter the city of Constantinople, and he's going to be able to conquer the city. And once he conquers the city, it's going to be put now under Ottoman control. Now, it's really interesting. What happens when he conquers the city? Let me go to our next slide. I have another image I want to show you. And this is this conquest of Constantinople that now becomes known as Istanbul. So, of course, that city has gone through a number of name changes. It goes from Byzantium to Constantinople, and now it's going to be called Istanbul. There's a very famous, what was church there, called the Church of Hagia Sophia. One of the things it's going to see is once the Ottomans come and take over, that church will be changed into a mosque. What is fascinating is kind of differing accounts we have to some degree of what happens when he comes in. I've read some accounts that, when he goes in there, Mehmed II makes sure to tell his people, don't destroy everything, don't destroy all the business, the buildings and the homes and all of that. But then I also have other accounts that I read, and I'm going to just read you one direct primary source here, describing a pretty brutal onslaught on Constantinople. So this is from one chronicler, a Greek guy, and it is important that he's Greek because, of course, there might be a little bit of bias there. But this is what he says. The Turks fell upon the defenseless population, stealing, robbing, plundering, killing, insulting, taking and enslaving men, women, and children, old and young, priests and monks, in short, every age and class. The blood ran in the street as if it had been raining, wrote another merchant named Baroa, and the bodies were tossed into the sea like melons into the canals of Venice. So, you do have accounts that this was actually a pretty, harsh attack against the city. But, when you're going to try to conquer this major city, that's very often that's what's going to happen. So that's going to be his biggest accomplishment in terms of conquering land. And people go, well, it's not a lot of real estate. It's one city, but it's an important city. I mean, this is one of the hardest cities to conquer. It becomes the center of the Ottoman Empire. And even after, we'll talk about eventually the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of modern Turkey. It's not the capital of Turkey today, Istanbul, but it's, of course, a major area in modern Turkey. So it becomes a very important city. So there you go. Now, is Mehmed II done? No, he conquers Constantinople, but he's going to do a bit more. What else is he going to conquer? Well, he's going to conquer a good chunk of these areas of Serbia and Bosnia, Herzegovina, all of this area over here you can kind of see in the orange up here, and down also to Greece. Everything you can see in orange down here into Greece he's going to conquer. So those are a couple pieces of real estate. In fact, there was such concern. So just to give you some rough time periods of when he's doing this, 1450s, he's going to basically take over Greece. 1460s, he's going to kind of move into Serbia and Bosnia. And remember, the Ottomans had already moved a little. There were already conflicts there earlier, if you remember, with the Battle of Kosovo. So this isn't the first time the Ottomans have went up into that area, but now they're getting more control in that region. There was even talk that he was going to go even further to Italy. I mean, look at, Italy's not that far away over here. And there was such concern that the Pope at the time, Sixtus IV, even fled Rome for a while. So it doesn't happen, but it is something that we're going to see, at least showing the growing strength of the Ottoman Empire. All right, so now what? So now the Ottomans under Mehmed II have really conquered a lot of territories. So now the question is, what else other than that is Mehmed II going to be responsible in doing? And one of the other key things I always want my students to know about is this other term here called the millets. So this is interesting. And for my students listening to this, there's a little bit more information in your textbook on this. For anybody else who's happening to listening to this, you're just kind of curious a little bit about this. Let me explain this idea and why it comes about. So one of the key things that happens is as the Ottomans are expanding, especially as they take over Greece and Constantinople, the demographics of who they're controlling changes. And your textbook explains this really nicely. Basically, before Mehmed II's invasions, or conquest, 1/10 of the population under Ottoman control were Christian or Jews, right? Very small. By the time Mehmed was done, it was closer to 80%, which now you're saying that the majority of the land, the majority of the people under Ottoman control are people who are not Muslims. And of course, the Ottoman civilization is. So what do you do now if you're a civilization and the vast majority of people you're controlling are no longer of your faith, right? And especially at a time where this mattered a lot. How do you do this? And for a long time, if you remember, initially you had this concept of the jizya, which I covered in the previous lectures, where you just pay an extra tax and then you don't have to convert. And then, of course, that's always, people say you can convert or whatever. But what if you don't want to convert, and if you're really holding on to these large groups of people who simply say, well, I'm not a Muslim, I don't want to practice the Islamic faith. And if you're an Ottoman Sultan, if you try to force too many people into this, there's a good chance you're going to uprise and rebel. And so you get the millets. And so what are these millets? Well, they're essentially self-autonomous areas inside of the Ottoman Empire, where they would be technically part of the Ottoman Empire, right? You have to pay taxes to the Ottoman Empire. You obviously have to be loyal to the Ottoman Empire. Your resources would often go to the Ottoman Empire, right? You can't have your own army or anything like that, but you can keep your own local laws, a lot of your own kind of way of life locally. So they're kind of self-autonomous regions. Now, it's interesting because in the short term, I think this was very smart on the part of the Ottomans, right? When we start to see this happening under Mehmed II, it gives them a good way to maintain an area of people who are obviously have a different view of religion than you do. But later on in history, when we talk about the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and this is something I cover for my History 165 students after the midterm, but I cover it in other lectures, anybody wants to watch, is that eventually you get in the 1800s AD this nationalism moving in. And a lot of these self-autonomous areas are like, well, we don't want to be a millet. We just don't want to be part of the Ottoman Empire. And so you'll get like the Greek people who say, well, nice, thank you for the millets, but we don't want a millet. We want to be Greece. Or Armenians, we want to be Armenians. Or the Jewish population are like, well, we don't want to be part of the Ottoman Empire, or, we want our own nation here. And so you're going to get this nationalistic movement in the 1800s that is really going to take these millets, and eventually we'll see bit by bit how the Ottoman Empire loses a lot of this territory we're talking about them taking. But at least for now, if you're living in the Ottoman Empire in the 1450s, 60s, 70s, this is a pretty good time for you. You're expanding, you're growing, you've basically ended the Byzantine civilization. I mean, 1453 kind of marks the end of Byzantine history as well with the fall of Constantinople, and you've become the dominant power in this region. So I think that's all pretty important and pretty impressive. All right, so that's all stuff you want to know about Mehmed II. Now, a couple more things. There's one kind of interesting story about Mehmed II, and one story that happens a little bit later, because not everything went perfectly for the Ottoman Empire. But you see this area of Wallachia, and it is an area that the Ottomans will eventually take over. But up there in Wallachia, one of the things that's going to happen is there's going to be a person who, well, isn't too keen on the Ottomans moving in. And this person who's not too keen on the Ottomans moving in is a man named Vlad, Prince Vlad. And this Prince Vlad apparently got hold of some of these Ottomans, captured them, and impaled them. Vlad the Impaler, as he was called. And this all happens in Wallachia. And yes, for those of you who may be thinking this all sounds very interesting and familiar to me, this is where we believe the story of Dracula came from this guy who was Vlad. I'll show you another slide in a second of this moving in. So, that was a little bit of a hiccup there, to say the least, for Mehmed II. Another interesting story, this happens a little bit later, but as you could see, as the Ottomans will expand later on, this is after the time of Mehmed II, but it's an interesting story, that's why I'm emphasizing it's a bit later. I get this word croissant, and I'm like, what the heck is croissant? Eventually, the Ottoman Empire is going to, get very close to Austria. And there's a little bit of story later on. I'm just mentioning it now just because I have a croissant with me, actually. And here you can see a croissant. Everybody pretty much knows what a croissant looks like, but let me just take it out here. And so everyone can see croissant. And if you think about it, a croissant, if you look at the shape of the croissant, this isn't a perfect one, it's shaped like a crescent. And, many people know that a crescent is an image that you'll see in the flags of many Middle Eastern Islamic nations, right? Because it's part of the Islamic religion, faith. So the story is that one point that the Ottomans in the 1680s, again, this is after the time of Mehmed II, were going up to Vienna and they were going to try to lay a siege to Vienna. Actually, you can kind of see it up here. And the story goes, it's kind of a legend, so I'm going to even preface this by saying I don't even know if this is 100% true or not, but that a baker found out that the Ottomans were building tunnels to try to get to them. He reported it to the authorities. They stopped the tunnels, and Austria was never invaded, or at least it was stopped. The invasion was stopped, and they were so grateful that they gave this baker a commission to create a croissant. Like you're eating the croissant, it's like you're defeating your enemy and eating your enemies and so forth. So that's at least one story of where we get the croissant. So I kind of always like to throw that quick little note in there. One more image here. This is Vlad the Third, Vlad the Impaler, and you can kind of see this image of what we have of perhaps what he did to people during this time. So you have that little story, and this is, we believe this is where you get the story of Dracula. All right, but overall, the reign of Mehmed II went pretty well. And so what's next? Well, after Mehmed II dies, we'll go through a few other Ottoman Sultan, Bayezid II to Suleiman. For any of you watching in my courses, if it says the next lecture, it says the Rise of the Ottomans Part 3. Don't get confused on that. You go like, I've already seen like parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What happens? Why is this part 3? It picks up from the same spot. What I've done sometimes with my lectures is they were longer and then I kind of redo them and make shorter lectures. But that one I may or may not have gotten to changing. So if it says part 3, don't worry about it. It picks up from this point, and that's the key thing. That we're picking up from Bayezid II and moving on. All right, so I hope that's clear. I hope you got a lot of good information there on Mehmed II, and I think that covers everything for this particular lecture. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thank you. Let me know if you have any questions.